that are included. This question came to my mind when I was reading Michael Colson's introduction. When he
Right,
talked about the aside, when he talked about soliloquy. While we
right,
can compare these two things, but they're completely different in their execution. So this
right,
was one of the things that had to be explored. And I'd
right.
just like to add one more question, and that would be the prevalence of Varna system and how it
Hmm.
affects the characters and their
Very,
positioning in the social hierarchy in the play Mudra Rakshasa. This also could be
very.
one of the questions.
So how would you respond to it?
The Varna system question.
Yeah.
So I would say the Jain monk and how he is considered inauspicious by uh, Mudra Rakshasa himself, by Rakshasa himself, whenever he sees him and he gets annoyed by that. That
Hmm.
could be one of those things. And how Brahma Mrityu is, no, Brahm Hatya
Uh,
is considered bad. And this
hmm.
is why they banish him. So
Good.
that's another thing that could be focused on. These two examples are like few of the several ones that could be picked up. Like
There
at
is
least
one more
this,
very clear cut. There is one more very clear cut example.
which one will be that, sir?
Regarding caste and Varna, apart from the two that you mentioned, right? For example, in Act 5, where is it? On page Act 6, we have not read it, that's why, right? Okay, on 27, I will just point out and then we can have a reading. On 273, this is Rakshas's uh, aside. So he says this Lakshmi or Yash or Kirti, fortune, right, has eloped, leaving her husband, a great emperor of noble birth, that is of Nanda dynasty, and has eloped with Mauryan, low-born harlot, uh, to low-born man. Right? Can you see this? And it's very interesting how gender and caste come together here. Right? Is there any relation between gender and caste?
So, in Michael Colson's introduction, he suggested that how Sanskrit was used as something that would differentiate between people of higher education and higher caste, and also that children and people who of not that high birth spoke Prakrit, and he also
Very,
included women as well in that particular.
very good, very good. So that also is yet another example. So you found almost four examples where you can see the social hierarchy coming right into play. Okay, very good. But the question that if you look at these lines, leaving her husband, uh, a great emperor of noble birth, uh, fortune has eloped to the Mauryan, low-born harlot to low-born man. So, what do you have to say about these lines? What is your response?
So most of the times, as things goes in the our culture, whenever a woman elopes with a man,
Hmm.
there is also a sense of integrity, and she's considered as something that epitomizes a family's respect. And if she goes away, then the family is stripped of that respect in a certain sense. So
Exactly.
she's like the Lakshmi of the family, perhaps.
Uh-huh.
That's
Uh,
another title given to a
uh,
woman. So
uh,
if he does anything bad, it brings bad luck. And, like in this particular line, it seems that she took all of her goodwill and gave it to him. And the
Very
word harlot suggests some sort of bitter resentment towards her for doing so.
And so, how do you associate this Lakshmi with the honor of the family? But what else? What else? You are absolutely right. Honor of the family alone, or what? Why is
So
woman
there is
considered honor
also
of the family?
an
Can anyone tell me why is it's woman's job to why is woman always responsible for family's honor? कौटिल्य कुछ भी करे, राक्षस कुछ भी करे, मलय केतु कुछ भी करे, पर्वतक विषकन्या के साथ कुछ भी करे, right? So why is woman considered as
so
guardian?
maybe it is because of the kind of marriage tradition that is in this country, not in this country like in past, because the woman is getting adopted in the other family and she has to become a part of that, so she leaves everything behind, like that. I'm trying to hint at the caste system here, the Varna system, that a woman of high birth is not supposed to go to a family of birth. So maybe
I
that's
completely
also
get it. Yes, yes,
something
yes.
that it
So
might
woman
be.
of high caste is not supposed to.
Marry into lower castes.
Why?
I read this in, I don't remember where, but
And do you think
it
that
has
kind of
something to.
belief, that kind of Indian values exist
So,
today?
yes, I vehemently agree that they. Yeah, I've seen that in plenty of places. Not going
Mhm.
to say where, but yeah, they are present, and it has a lot to do with quote unquote purity of person,
Mhm. And that purity is woman's responsibility, right?
agency. The factor of agency also plays a huge role in it. Women is stripped of her agency and she's just a vessel for
So,
birthing
how many of you
male
from the
heirs.
class agree with Bhavya? What he's saying, that this belief exists even today. It's widespread Indian value. Ghar ki Lakshmi. So that it's responsibility of women to take care of uh, family ki izzat.
It exists, but it is not as prevalent as it was at that time.
Mm-hmm. Is it? Can you? Are you? Do you have freedom to marry a man from lower caste today?
Some families do have that kind of
You have seen such
openness.
families.
Yes.
Good. Who else? I have to say that today it's not all that severe as it was in those days.
Sir, am I
How many?
audible?
Yeah. Who? Dia.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sir, I think that I don't want to use the word capitalism, but like for most part, if suppose a woman is marrying into a family who is considered to be quote unquote lower caste, then it only happens in the, I don't know, upper middle class or rich circles of the society. You know, that has, I think, provided a space for caste to be eliminated. You know, to be rich, you
Now
can be rich and then get borders.
this is a myth. Even a person from lower caste won't allow women from his caste to marry below his caste. Because in India, you always have somebody below you, somebody above you. So, among, let's say, for example, a woman from a very low caste, into inverted commas, right? doesn't have freedom to marry somebody from caste below that caste in India, even today. Yes, Stuti, anything to say?
Yes, sir, I agree to you because I belong to, I am a Vankar, so I belong in an SC category, and I have often heard many of my relatives talking about the, even below caste people, the ST people,
Exactly.
like उनके वहाँ क्यों जाए हम, वहाँ से
Exactly.
थोड़ी लाना है. So that's really common. It's more of a peer pressure thing. पूरा society तुमको बोलता है कि यार तुम वहाँ से ले आए, and that bugs you forever. That's
And
why people avoid
in
it
India,
altogether.
it's a kind of unending hierarchy. वो शिवलिंग की स्टोरी सुनी है आपने? आई डोंट नो दैट शिवा manifested himself as an infinite shivling of fire, and Brahma and Vishnu went to look for the end. Brahma went on the top, and Vishnu went below, and nobody could find the bottom of it. Right? Have you heard this story?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
caste
sir.
system is like that. There is always somebody below you, and there is always somebody above you. So what Dia says is not very accurate, right, Dia?
Sir, it's not. I'm not saying that caste system doesn't exist, but we had sociology in our 12th, so a point was being made that the people who have sort of climbed the social ladder in terms of money, for them, caste seems less relevant. The
Class
people not.
replaces caste, ऐसे कहना चाहिए ना sociological terms में, because
Yes.
class is a category of social stratification based on your financial status. That if you have better financial status, you will move upward in the society. While caste is a rigid birth-based stratification. So these are two different systems of stratifying or creating stratas in society. And I feel they are incompatible. Because this is, so even if a person from low caste, into inverted commas, is able to move upwards because of financial status, it will be very difficult for that man or woman to get married to person from equal class but upper caste. So a Brahmin girl will not marry a Dalit who is richer than her. Would you agree to this?
Sir, I mean, I
Yes.
don't think it's fixed in a place. Sometimes it may happen, sometimes it may not happen.
But most likely it won't happen. That's my guess. It may have, means there are exceptions which are individual. I'm not talking of individual exceptions, right? There might be people who are liberal in their outlook, families which are liberal and don't mind caste as don't accept caste. So these are exceptions, but I'm talking of overall society here. Yeah, Maitreyi?
Oh, I didn't realize my hand was raised. I'm sorry.
Bhavya, you had to say something?
So I just wanted, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
So I just wanted to say that caste system is not all of the time about marrying above or below your caste. Most of the time, even people at the similar so-called level cannot marry because intercaste marriages are frowned upon. I am personally from a place in UP which has seen a lot of bizarre things, and honor killings are not something that is frowned upon in that particular area. So I'd just like to say you can't say the caste system is not present in this country.
No,
Even
nobody is saying that.
normal,
I think whoever said,
it's
even Priya is not
extremely
denying that.
there.
Yeah,
Even
she is not
you
denying.
cannot, yes,
Uh,
sir, but even you
what she
cannot
is
just
saying is that,
discount that.
what she is saying that maybe because of economic condition changing, the caste system loses its hold.
The family originally just disowns you, and the kind of mental tortures they would commit towards you just so that you would bow down and at the end marry the person they want you to, in essence, to maintain your integrity, your, I don't know, integrity or whatnot. It's a really frustrating issue, but yeah, I suffer from it. I've seen it happen plenty of times to people very much close to me. So it gets personal perhaps, but
Yeah,
I cannot
it
say
is
that.
first.
Yes, sir. And it sickens me, but it is true and it is there. And
Yeah.
if I, the thing is that you cannot just get out of it no matter what you do, even if you're economically sound. You wouldn't
Ah,
want your parents to disown you, right? Like,
right.
because at the end of the day, they're your parents. So this is
Mm.
not that great an issue, but something that we have to actually live and deal with every day.
Yes, absolutely. And Jai, what is it that you want to say?
Sir, I wanted to say that, how not just this part, but when someone marries from an upper caste, so it is, hailed as a victory or something that, amazing that you did. Like, wo to
Ah,
Brahmin ki laya ya Rajput ki laya. So that
तेरे
sort of
में
notion also
मर्दानगी
promotes this whole idea.
है, तेरे में मर्दानगी है.
So it's like,
So gender and
really,
caste are intertwined very deeply. That's what I'm trying to point out in the whole conversation. That the reason gender is policed, right? Women are policed with and burdened with great moral burden load is because the caste wants to uphold, to use Bhavya's word, integrity or purity. And that's why gender, woman is extra. And in fact, caste is something that is endogamous, right? It's defined as an endogamous system where a community preserves its status on the basis of marriage of their women, right? So the kul ki izzat, kutum ki izzat. So next time when you hear film dialogue which talks about izzat lutna, right? It's not izzat of that poor girl, right? She does not have any izzat anyway, but it's the caste izzat that is being robbed. She is being so it's an attack on that caste as well. So assault, sexual assault on women is very often sexual assault on caste. Because she is considered to be the unit which preserves this, right? So, and caste system and Varna system are also complicatedly related. Means Varna is one of the earliest theoretical frame rather than a social reality, right? Which existed in Manusmriti and that. Jati is something much more specific. Means a Brahmin may be a Varna, but it has hundreds and hundreds of jatis, various kinds of jatis and sub-jatis. So Varna is a kind of broad occupational hierarchy, and Jati is far more complex network of communities, and they come together in a very complex way. Uh, so Varna has got certain mobility. Means, for example, Mauryans, Nandas, they could become kings even if they were from so-called lower castes, right? They could become emperors, and then they got this reputation as Kshatriyas. For example, Hun and Shakas who came from outside, they got absorbed in the Varna system as Kshatriyas. Greeks would be absorbed, and even certain Muslim rulers would be absorbed as Kshatriyas, right, in the Varna system. So it is far more fluid, while Jati is something very specific and endogamous. So conflicts, and both of them operate in a very complex way that is very difficult to understand for sociologists and anthropologists to make. It's very complex arrangement. And it varies from region to region. And as Bhavya was rightly pointing out, he has seen a lot of honor killings and extremely oppressive structures in UP. Now, it may not be so in certain parts. In some parts, it may be even more. It takes a different color or different dynamics in some other parts of India. So it varies from region to region, the caste dynamics, and it also deeply affects the politics, right? So as for students of Indian literature, we cannot think of Indian literature without looking at caste discrimination that is very often built into Indian literary texts. We cannot overlook that. Means you cannot reduce it to that either, but at the same time, you cannot overlook. For example, when Rakshas says this, right, then he has served Nandas and he's served more. He's going to serve Mauryans, but even then, he has a thing about their caste origin, right? So there is a kind of dislike for Rakshas, for Mauryans, right? Which is very interesting. Yeah. So what are you thinking of in the context of today's conversation? It's a very important question that Bhavya has brought up in reference to study of Indian literature in general as well. How many of you feel that caste is not so much prevalent and reservations are not needed, etc.? And you are free to say that because you are citizens of India, right? But it needs to be discussed. Because this is one of the primary social realities of our society. How many of you agree that caste is reality in our society? Bhavya has seen, Gaurav, Stuti, Diya, Harsh, Harshita, Bhargavi, Dharma, Jai, Rushin, Arusha, Yogini, Kumar, Anuj, Anudya. And how many of you think that it's not such an important reality? Maitreyi, okay. Anuj, yeah, okay. Gaurav, no. Gaurav, you have to say something? No.
No, sir.
Anuj, Anuj, you think it's a real social problem or it's not? Maitreyi, what was your perception of it?
Sir, I think that it is not as prevalent as it used to be. Granted, there are families yet still that follow the Varna system and they really think caste matters. But I think it's much less than it was. So I feel like it's not something that, it's not primarily dominant anymore.
Okay. Then why are the newspapers full of matrimonials, full of caste categories?
सर मैंने ये नहीं बोला ना कि पूरी तरह से नहीं है. मैंने ऐसा नहीं, मतलब I am saying कि there is a
freedom or greater. You mean that it is not so strong these days? Is that what you are saying?
Yes. In the sense that more and more people have started to, disregard the whole system. But there are still families that probably believe
I would be
that
happy if that is happening. I would be happy if that is happening. So it doesn't seem to be so much. Maybe if you try to cross the line and maybe marry below your caste and get a first-hand experience of it, then maybe your opinion won't be the same. Just a hypothesis, not a personal remark, but very often the fact that when we say discrimination Upnani is because we are on a different side of discrimination phenomena. We are not at the receiving end of it. So we think that it doesn't exist. But if we are on the other side, then it would be a different picture altogether. Yeah, Gaurav, you had to say something?
Yes, sir. I was just saying that it is not that much prevalent in the society. I mean, the elderly people have these thoughts in their mind, but the younger generation, like us and the friends I meet, I think we don't think about that much.
No, you
Yeah.
will think at the time of marriage. Not now. Because basically, you have to understand what caste is. Caste is a mechanism of endogamy and stratification, hierarchy, endogamy and social hierarchy based on birth. So endogamy is when you have to marry outside your caste. So that is what it is. So even that question does not bother you because that problem is not in front of you right now. Yeah, Bhargavi.
Sir, I think if you are able to overlook the fact that it still exists, you are on the privileged side of the country. You are not exactly going through that. And even if you are thinking that there are families who are progressive, who are trying to, break the systems, then you should know that the ratio is absolutely huge. The families who are progressive and the ones who are not. So it's very much prevalent. But since we are privileged people, at least a few of us here who are not part of the crisis, I mean not the crisis, but uh, I guess the issues that they face, it's easier for us to overlook.
How many of you agree with Bhargavi? And easier because you are not on the you are not in the firing line. Yes. Once you are at the and given the gender caste linkage here, right? Mauryan is born to low caste harlot, right? So look at the phrase harlot. And I don't know if we discussed harlot in William Blake's poem.
London. We did.
Sir,
We
we
did.
discussed it.
Sir.
तो वहां पे हार्लट सिर्फ हार्लट थी, यहाँ पे लो कास्ट हार्लट है. ये डिफरेंस है ब्लेक के लंदन में और हमारे पाटलिपुत्र में, है ना?
Sir, and I also feel like if we're talking about people who are trying to break the barricades, I feel like there's also a different privilege there कि आप face नहीं कर रहे हो ना, तो आप सोच सकते हो, you can discuss and break the barricades. When you are in environment जहाँ पे तुमको इतना patriarchy, इतना caste system dominate करता है, affect करता है in all your aspects of your life, then it's not that easy to just break the barricades. And a lot of people are still stuck there.
Yeah, most of Indians are stuck there.
Yeah.
Anyone wants to say something to this? Add to, disagree with what is being discussed in the class? Because class is the place where we can disagree, right? Yeah, Anuj. Yeah. You want to say something? Go ahead, go ahead. Dharma, you want to say something? Shin, you want to say something?
So,
Okay.
so sometime if someone break the barricades, they already not involving in society or in societal function because they are financially able to work on themselves. So maybe this can help
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
break the barrier.
So you may have certain space and that privilege to break that barricade, right? And maybe you're not so much dependent on your caste mechanisms. कास्ट को समाज कहते हैं हमारे यहाँ, तो आप समाज के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट नहीं हो very often. So you may have that privilege to break. And in history, we know that all these things have been broken. It's not a rigid, fixed system. People have, and in ancient Varna system, you have this Anulom and Pratilom marriages, right? Anulom, I think, is when I don't know the exact difference, but a woman from lower caste can marry a person from upper caste, and a woman from upper caste can marry a person from lower caste. I say Anulom, Pratilom marriages were there, and even in ancient times, and there were new communities entering the Varna system all the time, right? Which did not exist, and it was always under a crisis. For example, Bhagavad Gita would talk about the crisis of Varna Sankar, right? Which is a product of Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga produces Varna Sankar. So it existed long time ago. So it's not a rigid system with barricades which have never been broken, but very often broken at a cost, which has varied. Yeah, Anuj, bolo. Anuj is raising his hands but not speaking. Bhavya, you want to say something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, bolo.
It was regarding what Bhargavi has said about the economic factors ringing in as to the freedom of choice that you have. And I also wanted to just point out that many a times, even when a family accepts the couple, accepts the change of uh, the values that were placed, their society, their samaj, is to say, will not, and then they will be banished from it, sort of, and they will not.
Yeah, so when you hear things like चार लोग क्या कहेंगे, right? तो ये चार लोग कौन है? तो आपके कास्ट के चार लोग हैं.
Relatives as well, especially the relatives.
रिलेटिव्स को कास्ट में होते हैं, राइट? लोग क्या कहेंगे यानी लोग आपके कास्ट के लोग क्या कहेंगे यूजुअली. Yeah, so it's a complex subject. It doesn't have any final answers, and people like Dr. Ambedkar had a program for dismantling caste. He said that we should dismantle caste from our minds and have intercaste marriages and all that. So, but that doesn't seem to have happened, right? It's unfortunately, and he would argue that we cannot have political democracy without having social democracy. If a girl in your home does not have a say in who she will spend her life with, then how can she decide she can have say in who will rule over India? That's what he said. So political democracy without social democracy is futile. That's what we believe. Okay. So we found around 4 to 5 instances where caste discrimination becomes prominent, right, in the play, right, Bhavya? One in the language itself, that upper caste people would speak Sanskrit, especially kings. Women were not allowed to speak. They would speak Prakrit, right, and Pali or Apabhransh or whatever. So language itself is caste hierarchy. Right? Secondly, you pointed out about why Rakshas was left off, right, without penalty. Because penalty for a Brahmin is not the same as penalty for Shakatadas or Chandandas or others, right? So penalties and punishments were also unequally distributed. Then, where else, Bhavya?
So the Jain monk.
The Jain monk, because Jains were looked down upon by Vedic Brahmins and Vedic upper caste people because they abandoned this whole Vedic system. And
They
Vedic
were
system,
Nastics.
so they were called Pakhandis and Vratyas and all that. Bauds were called that, Bauds and Jains. And in Karnataka, Jains and Vedic Brahmins were at loggerheads, and there was huge violence in older times. There was persecution of Jains by the Vedic Brahmins, Vedic rulers who had, and there was a lot of bloodshed. Many Jains were killed, right? And in Kashmir also we hear of many Bauddhas being massacred because of, in fact, what happens after Maurya dynasty is also interesting. If you have read history, I don't know how many of you have studied this in your history class, is that probably the last king of Mauryans, I forget his name, was killed by his generals called Pushyamitra Shunga. And Shunga was a Brahmin probably, and he killed this Buddhist Mauryans and became the ruler of Magad, right? And that is considered to be a turning point in history of Brahminism in India. So he was aggressively pro-Vedic Brahmin. And later on, Guptas were also very pro-Vedic, though they were also patronizing Buddhists and Jains. So if you look at Ajanta and Ellora caves, then many of these are from made by the donation of people and kings of Gupta dynasty, right? So Buddhist architecture you will find it. But at the same time, under the Guptas, you find codification of Varna system happening in things like Manusmriti and all that. Right? So Manusmriti and various Dharma Shastras were written in Manusmriti period, in the Gupta period, where you find Kalidas and you find Vishakdatta and others of these times. Okay. So what we will do is we'll have reading in the next class. Probably we have run out of time. So is it okay if we have reading in the next class?
Yes,
But
sir.
but I suggest that, yeah, Bhavya can put a list of questions in the group. Will that be okay, Bhavya?
Yes,
So that
sir.
others can also
will,
add to it.
yes, sir. I'll do that. I don't think that I have read enough to pose better questions. Like
They are
you,
very good. See, they are very good. Others
sir,
can think of other questions and add to it.
sir, but when we are talking about all the terms that you've given us, and we need to analyze it on the basis of that. Like I'm accustomed because because of even in my school we used to do figures of speech and all these things. I'm accustomed to how to analyze a poem or a play or a short story like that. Those things from the
Mhm.
Western point of view is
Yeah, the
easy.
stylistic analysis now, Bhavya, becomes very interesting problem for students of Indian literature and English translation.
Yes, sir. So
Because
I wanted to
Sanskrit
read.
style is very different and English translational style will be very different. So which style are we analyzing? Are we analyzing Michael Coulson's style or are we analyzing Vishakadatta's style? Right? Because the translation is never an exact substitute of uh, the so-called original text, right? I use the word so-called because text cannot become original if it is not translated. Only when you have a translation, it becomes original. So translation confers originality on the something. Would you agree with me? The translation or
Yes,
copy confers originality upon something. Things are not original in themselves until they are copied. Very
that
anti
adds
idea.
importance as well.
Huh?
So that adds importance as well. And what I meant, and I also think that since we have already done those terms, since we have already discussed so things about the poetics, maybe
Hmm.
even if it's not entirely possible for us to apply that, but since these particular people have done, maybe we can try it for once.
Yes,
I'd
yes, you can.
implore everyone to do
And
that.
even I won't make a very big deal out of it. If you're not able to, or if you make some mistakes, I'm not going to be very harsh on that. I will be lenient where in your, because you are exposed to these terms for the first time in your life, right? So I don't really expect you to be experts at it. Though I expect you to actually start using it and thinking about it in the context of the text. So if I ask you a question on plot construction of Mudra Rakshas, then you have to discuss how plot is organized. You may use those terms, but if you fail to use them very accurately, I won't be very harsh on it and cut your marks, right? Because you're not exposed to this. But I expect you to try. Is that clear? Now, this is all if then wali cheez hai, if we have offline exams.
So, but we can still write an asset. I think that
Yes,
would be better
yes,
than
very
having
much.
a
You can
simple
still write
multiple
and
choice
send
question
it
for
to me.
intern.
Right, very much. You can send that to me, email me, and I will give my comments on it. I will be happy to look at it. Yeah.
And so the terms as also are not as much as, like, it's not that they're difficult to understand. They're
Hmm.
relatively there in your mind even while reading that.
Right,
Like,
right.
what's
जैसे
difficult is
जैसे
applying
बीज
them
है,
to the
बिंदु है, प्रयत्न है, यत्न है, प्रयत्न है, then फल प्राप्ति है, then you see the possibility of phala prapti happening towards the end, right?
avastha
So,
is
avastha, various
another term that
avasthas,
was there.
right, right. So not that they are very difficult, but I won't make a very big deal out of it at this stage, because you are not really full-fledged students of Sanskrit literature, right? Does anyone want to say something to this conversation? And I suggest all of you try doing that and send that answer to me, right? Because what you are losing out upon because of pandemic is your writing skill. And writing is extremely critical to your academics. That is where you are losing out on. It is a big learning loss. Yeah. Okay. Chalo. So see you on Monday, right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.